Hello and welcome to Poetry, Prose, and Personality. I'm Thasia Ann, and we have all the way from New York, George Gaida.
Hi everybody.
We're going to do a little different thing tonight, and it's going to be fun. Woohoo!
So the reason I'm here is that I asked Thasia if she would talk to me about poetry and community, especially in Erie. She being well positioned to do this. And so I'm going to ask her some questions as if I am the host, although we all know that you are the host. That will never change, will always be the host. And we'll just jump into it, I suppose. So normally what I do, Thasia, is I ask people to tell me a little bit about their lives and how they got into poetry to start off.
My first foray in poetry was actually in 7th grade. And we were in our English class, and some lady walked in with a bunch of file folders and stuff, and she said, she talked to the teacher and she left, and the teacher said, get out your paper and pens, we're going to write a poem. Okay.
Who was this lady?
Well, it turns out that she was coordinating for the whole Erie City School District this writing sampling. I guess they wanted to see, like, levels. You know, how well were people writing, how well did they understand English? But they didn't really set it up like that. So they just threw it out there, and I got out my paper and pen, and she said, the teacher said something to the effect of, think of something that made you happy, think of something that made you really sad, you know, something like that, and just start putting your pen to the paper and see what happens. And I wrote my first poem. About 2 weeks before that, a young man across the street had been killed in Vietnam. First poem was called War.
Wow.
And they were like, so I made it in the sampler.
How old were you at this point?
Well, 7th grade, whatever that was.
12 years old,
Yeah,
maybe?
something like that, yeah.
Wow, okay. So an early start.
Yep. It's the only poem that I can even pretend to have memorized. I have a brain injury, so I can't memorize my own stuff. That's why. I love the fact they call it poetry readings, because I read.
Most people do.
Yeah.
Or I would say many
Yeah.
do. So after that, you're 12 years old, you've been given this early introduction to poetry. Did you stick with it at that point?
For a little while, and then I made a not wise decision and got married at 16. And when somebody's a lot older than the 16-year-old, there's usually a reason they're going for a 16-year-old, even though the 16-year-old thinks, I got a 22-year-old guy. He's looking for somebody who will put up with him, so he had to come from 22 to 16. So then, if I wrote happy stuff, I must be writing it about someone else, and if I wrote sad stuff, I must be writing it about him. So what I did write, I threw in a wood stove for a long time.
Literally in the wood stove?
Literally in the wood stove.
Wow.
But I had to get it out, so I couldn't not write.
So
I read it a few times,
You
and
literally had to write it
and destroy it.
and no one else ever saw it.
You're right.
Do
Absolutely.
you remember any of them?
No, just most of it was sad, you know, and just.
Wow.
But-
It was here in Erie.
Well, actually, what those kind of people do is isolate you from your loved ones. So by the time I did escape, we were living on 40 acres surrounded by game lands, and the nearest neighbor was like a half a mile away.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you had that experience at 16. That's your next experience with poetry, and then what happens after that?
Well, I stayed, I don't want to go into a lot of details about that, but I stayed a really long time. You know, I married him in church, thought God wouldn't forgive me, went through a whole lot of stuff, finally realized God didn't want me to die for a decision I made at 16, and finally got away. One of the first things I did after I got away was write about the situation and getting away. And I was putting them in a box under my bed, and my 17, 18-year-old son knew that I was a writer. And so he would once in a while ask to read what I wrote, and he saw the whole situation exactly like I did, because he had been through it too. The younger brother, he still thought Dad was okay, so I didn't share it with him because I didn't, you know.
Right.
Anyway, so the older son, Mark, and I became bonded over poetry, and I have the one and only poem that I know of his that exists on paper, and he has since passed away, so I have that, and I actually put that in one of my books. So.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
But at least you had the bond.
Yes, oh, absolutely. I used to, when he was 17 and 18, I would take him from way out in the country where we lived and bring him all the way into Erie. At the time, there was a little coffee shop called Cappuccino's, and we would sit and people watch, and and I did poetry readings. I have been doing poetry readings at Erie since like 1990.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go back to the question
Yeah.
of bonding over poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Where were you doing poetry readings in Erie in 1990? Where can one go out and do poetry readings?
The park that's very close to here,
Yes.
there was a little coffee shop called Cappuccino's.
They had regular poetry readings?
Yes.
Do you remember who hosted those poetry readings?
Nobody hosted them.
Really?
It was just the guy Andy who worked there would turn the mic on and say, "Okay, go for it," and I was there a lot. And I was getting my
total
poetry.
DIY poetry reading.
Yeah, do it yourself.
That
Absolutely.
doesn't happen all that often.
No. I'm surprised I
Wow.
remember Andy's name. He was pretty cool. So if you're out there, Andy, I remember you.
Andy, God bless you, man. So that's the only game in town, literally.
At that time that I knew of, absolutely, and for a long time. And then when the big Starbucks came in town, the little cappuccinos
Couldn't hold up.
And they went right around the corner, so cappuccinos.
Okay.
A couple more owners and tried different things.
So there's this pattern of you doing poetry in sort of these bursts up to this point,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So what's the next burst? First of all, can I ask you,
Oh, absolutely.
from those cappuccinos, from those cappuccinos readings, did you make friends who were lasting friends?
Yeah, a really interesting thing happened. Like I said, when I got out of that relationship, I started writing a lot about that. And a couple times during the relationship, we had gone to different counselors for help, but he always said, she needs some help. And she's got a problem. Yeah, he's sitting there. But anyway, so when I started writing furiously about it after I was free, I called up my old counselor and I said, is this healthy for me, or is this actually bad? Am I just dragging it on and on and on and should just let it go? And she said, no, keep writing. And then she sent me to the local domestic violence shelter that's in town, and I volunteered for them for 8 years. I wrote a book called Love and Licorice Whips. It's about his candy-coated lies, and I used it to help women know, because they would go through it and read 4 or 5 minutes, and they're like, oh, yours says stew, mine was spaghetti on the floor, this, it wasn't the dog he was kicking, it was the cat he threw out the window, just different things. So
your prose writing more
Yeah.
than poetry really
yeah,
helped you to find people you could reach out to and
right,
become part of a
Right.
community with.
yeah. So I actually went in and out of schools for over 8 years. I took my story and I took facts and figures, and then I created a warning sign list. And I would, go through the facts and figures and then tell a little part of my story, and then I'd say, and here was the warning sign. And then I do some more facts and figures. And the one I always started my presentation with, every 12 seconds in these United States, a woman is beaten by her husband, boyfriend, or lover. And while I said that, another woman was beaten. And so I just use those kind of facts, and then I would put my story in there, and at the end I'd give out warning signs. And, for a long time, you don't know, is this doing any good? Is this working? And then it started at, Walmart. Are you the lady that was at Walmart?
Right.
Or in the schools? Are you the lady that was talking about domestic violence? I got my mom away from my dad. Or a guy. I had guys approach me. I got my sister out of a terrible relationship because of that piece of paper with the warning sign.
So writing gets you to a place where you become sort of a social activist.
Yes.
Raising awareness
Yes.
of the serious social problem. Does that continue for you when you enter the poetry scene around here? And when does that start for you?
Well, there was another lull that I can't even really explain. Just life kind of took over, and I got hurt in 2008. That's when I got my brain injury, and I couldn't work for a long time. And I kept seeing in the paper this bookstore that had poetry. So
And that was Chuck Joy's.
yeah,
reading.
he worked with Catherine Cottrell, who owned the bookstore. So I went with my little satchel of poems, and I, just sat back the first time to see if my stuff would fit in. And, I didn't always. I mean, I had stuff that was not all domestic violence, so I would read some of the lighter stuff. And
You were always writing poetry over the years.
pretty much. I mean, there were lulls, but pretty much. And I had this satchel that I kept for a long, long time that was shoved full of my poetry. I have so many now I couldn't even begin to count. And I'm still a paper person. I don't handwrite as much as I used to, but I still print everything out. I have one poem on my phone, which I read recently at Calamari's, because I wanted to show them old dogs can't learn to.
Can I ask you, it's not an important point, maybe it is. Is there something lost, or is even just neutrally some difference for you between people's reading poems or performing them or reading them on paper rather than, pulling out the phone and getting to the poem? Is there a difference?
I have a poem called The Note, and I can't recite it, but it's about, in 1968, my two little girlfriends and I, last day of school, and my girlfriend has one of those triangular folded pieces of paper, football notes.
Sure.
And she undoes it, and we're giggling, and she puts it out, and she opens it up, and it says, "Charlene, I really like you, Bobby." And we giggled like schoolgirls, because we were.
Sure.
And I realized that 40 years later, I can still see that whole scene. And will a girl remember a text the same way?
Oh. Wow.
I feel like they're losing some really important things.
So there's no artifact, at least there's no memory of an artifact of a poem.
Yeah.
You can't remember what it looked like on paper because, let's face it, sometimes when we pull out a poem to read it, sometimes we actually recognize the shape of the poem on paper.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I write in a particular way. Like if you've ever seen Matt Borzon's writing, he has a particular style.
Sure.
And I have had a similar style since the 90s that I can show you over and over again.
Sure.
I still do regular ones, but I have this when I'm in this one, a lot of the domestic violence ones like that. And I think it's because in domestic violence, you don't get a lot of time. You never know what the next minute brings, so I wrote them like that, so you would get that feeling of what it was like.
So there's a visual element, and naturally there's also a visual element to performance. And
Yeah.
I've been to Erie a bunch of times and seen a few performances here, and I've also walked around the town.
Right.
It is somebody to read. It's a sort of visually striking town.
Yeah.
It's a Rust Belt town, and it has that kind of character. It's on one of the biggest lakes in the world.
Yeah.
And it's also got hills and odd streets and old buildings, like say a Rust Belt town. So it's kind of a place that makes you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like there's a lot of visual orientation here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm off base on this, but I'm feeling that in the performances and the way people gather too. The first time I went to Poets Hall,
Yeah.
the stage was kind of sideways.
Mm-hmm.
In the room.
Right.
So it was almost like theater in the round.
Yes, it was very much.
Which was unusual. I had never really seen that before.
They
in
had
small
tried
poetry.
something else first, and it just didn't feel right. And when they did that, everybody's like, yeah, this is what we needed, because you could get more people around to get the whole experience.
Okay. So there's like a spectacle element
Yeah.
to the performances,
Right.
which is nice.
Right.
So I think it brings more people out.
Right.
Have you found that over the years you've been attending poetry events in Erie for now nearly 30 years? Are they generally well attended?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
For example, I have a poetry show that I do out on Edinburgh University campus every March. It's part of their Women History Month, and it's called Women of Word, featuring a few man-made words. The first year it was all women, and I realized even though that was important that first year, that there was too many of my male poet friends that had a lot to say on society and being advocates and so on. So the very second year, I think it was, I brought in Daryl Brown, who had been working at a homeless shelter, and he had a whole collection on what it was like working at a homeless shelter. So, and that was my segue into bringing them in. But I bring it up because this is a free performance. It's an hour long. Afterwards, there's a meet and greet with the poets where the college provides these little beautiful petite fours and chocolate-covered strawberries and diffused water like only a university campus can do.
Sure.
It's all free. And I can say there's probably 3 poets from Erie that have ever attended it. Sorry for calling you out, guys. But,
Well, so two things come to mind.
I do want to preface that. I do understand a lot of the poets of Erie are on foot, so getting to Edinburgh will be more of a challenge.
Right, and this might be a problem with any city
Right.
group of poets.
Right.
Many of whom will not
Yes.
drive their own car.
Right.
Okay. That said,
Yes.
I'm thinking of 2 things in relation to that. One is this question of the divide between, or perceived divide between community poets and academic poets, or if you like, poets who sort of are able to go from university to university around the country and do these readings
Right.
because they've published
Right.
with whatever presses or journals. But locally, that would be a difference maybe between the academic poets and the community poets.
And
Is there one, or do they mingle here?
Well,
Are
the
they-
thing is, everything that's done on Edinburgh University is me, and I have poets from Erie that are in it. I've invited some poets. I tell every poet, this is the law, you have to see it once first because it is not an open mic. It's not even a feature. We do conversations. So if we pick the subject of rape, we might have 3 girls with a poem about rape, and I build them into a conversation. On domestic violence, we'll have somebody be like the counselor and 3 or 4 girls doing. So you have to see it before I can bring you in because you just can't walk in cold. One poet said, "Tell me when to be there and I'll read." It's like, sorry, that's not how it works.
That's interesting. Yeah, we do a similar thing in the town where I live
Do you?
in New York. We do poetry, but then there's a conversation
Yeah.
equal length to
Yeah.
reading.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's one sort of important connection, I think, around poetry in any community is this sort of connection of different groups of people
Yeah.
who wouldn't necessarily engage with each other
Right.
in poetry. Maybe can bring them together if we get the cars.
well, I beseech all poets to support each other because if you want them to
Yes.
come see you, then you should go see them. And if you
Absolutely.
want them to buy your book, then you should
Yes.
maybe so. Anyway,
So
I'm done preaching.
I will just say where I am from, which is Long Island. There's a very strong community of poets who literally follow each other around from reading to reading.
Wow, that's
Maybe
fun.
30, 40 people, and support each other and buy each other's books, and we'll show up to several readings a week.
Wow.
So kudos to them, but also I would hope that that's something
Yeah.
that people do and other people follow along.
Right.
C. Williams, with whom I was just speaking, told me that one night at Poets Hall he had 83 people in the space meant for perhaps fewer than that, but only 24 of them read, which is a
Yeah,
lot,
uh-huh.
but 59 of them didn't,
Yeah.
which is incredible to have
Yes.
that many people in a place to come see poetry.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I
Does
thrive
that
on
happen
it.
here a lot?
It's so hit and miss. You really can't count on it. But for my performance out there, and yes, I have the university, but I have all of Edinburgh and McCain coming, and we have packed the space twice now.
How did you forge the connection with Edinburgh?
Okay, here's how it started.
Okay.
When I first came up with the idea, I heard a woman come into the bookstore and do a poem on domestic violence, and I thought, that speaks to my poems on, it was like it made a conversation. And I tucked that away back here, and, I'll do something with that someday. Well, it was only like 2 weeks later, as I mentioned, I had a son who passed away, and somebody did a poem about their son passing away, and I was like, wow, this is not a fluke thing. I could make this happen. So I reached out to a few of my favorite poet friends, and knowing their poetry, I call them favorites, knowing that their poetry would speak to mine. And that's how the first Winter Word happened. And the subjects were definitely more just female-oriented that first year. So where it started, though, was one of the poets locally who now works a weird shift, so she doesn't get to a lot of functions anymore. But Megan Collins was going to college on Barron, Penn State Barron campus, and she was actually taking poetry at the time. So she spoke to her professor, who said, well, why don't you come here and do the gender conference? So the first 2 years of WOW, we did the gender conference out there. The first year, we were in a chapel, and I have a beloved, everybody who knows her loves her. She's 85 or 86, Marge Warner. And I started the performance that year. In the beginning, I want everyone to say one negative word about women that bothers you. And at the end, we did a positive word. And there we are in the chapel. We get to Marge, and she goes, slut! And I was like, we're in a chapel. Oh no, what's going to happen? But she said somebody had called her that when she was a teen, and it had just hurt her whole life. And she threw it out in the chapel that day, and it doesn't think about it anymore.
So it's amazing, as a side thought, people in poetry, you can say things through poetry in venues and settings, in groups of people that you might not otherwise be able to say. And I'm thinking back maybe 25 years ago when we did a reading in the basement of a church in Brooklyn, and one of my friends who's a poet read a poem about, it was a fantasy about slitting her father's throat. And the priest walked in.
Oh my.
In the middle of the poem. And yet the poetry reading was allowed to continue because I think it was poetry readings. It was kind of this privileged speech.
Yes.
So I'm kind of wondering too about the privileged speech vis-a-vis the space of privileged speech, or the kind of mode of privileged speech to talk about women's issues in particular, right?
Yes.
What can you say about that? What use is poetry particularly, and poetry readings, poetry meetings around the written word for women and for dealing with problems that are particular to women's experience?
I think for one, if you're sitting in the crowd and you've been keeping the secret for a long time, and a woman gets up and does one on that subject, whether it be rape, molestation, any of the bad stuff, and she's sitting there keeping that secret, and then somebody comes up and reads about it, and then maybe another woman comes up because she got raped because of her, and she comes up and reads hers, and the next thing you know, that woman's like, I have permission to speak. Excuse me. So I think that poetry and poetry readings give women, anyone who, sorry.
Take a moment for the seagulls to express themselves. They've arrived.
Birds. He just doesn't want to get pooped on, that's all.
I'm just going to have to talk louder.
Okay, I think I'm good. Okay.
Go ahead.
So I think she just feels a woman could be given bravery being in that place where other people are talking about it, and feel like she doesn't maybe have to keep that secret anymore. And maybe she won't do anything about it that night. She might go home and privately write something now. But I think it's the start, and it can work on any subject. And I want to clarify that I am very much aware that domestic violence happens to men also, and all the other terrible things happen to men also. We're just generally right now speaking about women. Sometimes I get called out on that.
So, dealing with these issues in writing, and dealing with them just verbally too in a group is obviously very important.
Yeah.
What distinguishes the experience of dealing with them through an art form? Through either, and we can include prose in this, but certainly poetry. How does that differ from just free writing, or sitting around talking and sharing experience, if it does?
I think for me, I could take something very ugly and make it pretty by rhythm, by line breaks, longer lines, short lines, long line, short line. So I could take it and make such an ugly thing not quite so horrible to deal with.
Okay.
And that's my experience.
Being able to contain it,
yes,
to shape it and
yes,
mold it into something
that I was in control of.
To transform it
Yeah.
into something else.
Yeah. And I think that I just hit on it in my own brain. I could control it then. It wasn't him in control of me. I am now control of the whole situation that I wrote on this piece of paper. I could burn it. I could keep it now.
So let me expand it
Sure.
from there. So we're talking about this is all happening in a community setting, Erie, Pennsylvania,
Right.
and it's important to me because I'm trying to find out more about communities all over the country. And
Right.
every community's got its own set of problems and
Right.
its own wonderful assets, and different character of its people, character of its culture. But in Erie, we have a certain set of people, we have a certain set of characteristics, we have a certain economic and social reality, right? And
Absolutely.
lately, Erie is quite famous for its economic and social struggle
Very unfortunate.
because of the last election and the current situation we find ourselves in. So in that regard, what you're talking about with women's being able to transform their experience, what have you seen in terms of the poetry community in Erie and the way it's been able to make an impact in transforming life here in some way for the people involved?
Well, you're very familiar with Marisa Moxonder.
Yes.
And early on, when and I don't know all of her history, but when she first started appearing on the Erie scene, she liked the fact that I was talking about subjects like that. And so I invited her. She wrote one poem that stands out on domestic violence. I'm sorry, I keep going back to it.
No, it's okay.
It's called The Shoes. And at one time, our shelter, to bring awareness to everybody, went to the courthouse, and they put out, I don't know, 100, 200 pairs of shoes. And that was the number of people who had been knocked out of their shoes or killed. And so she wrote this. It's hard to say it's beautiful when it's about such an ugly subject, but she's so eloquent with her writing, and that line, they were knocked out of their shoes. And so I invited her. I skipped a little part. After we did the 2 years on Barron, I actually went back to college with the brain injury. Who would think that going with a brain injury would be a great idea? But in this area, I was supported by a OVR, Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, and they helped me, guide me through the process to go back to school. And I thought, this is my chance, even though I was, 58 or something when I did that. So I immediately jumped into all the stuff on campus that I could, and we were doing a domestic violence walk, and I invited both Marisa and Luchetta Manis, who also goes by Cookie.
Yes, I've heard about her. I do not
blue
know
hair,
her.
yeah.
I do not know
Blue
her.
hair. If you ever met her, you would remember the blue hair. But we marched around the campus, and we stopped at different places and did the poetry and so on. So I'm trying to remember exactly what your question was, but through that experience, I was able to, like a lot of us started doing this poetry.
The question is about that, and it's about the way that you've seen poetry maybe have an impact on the community or the people involved in it, at least. In any
People
way.
listen about domestic violence in a different way. If it's an article in the paper, you might read a few lines, oh, this is too painful.
Right.
But he's been with me. I've gone to several campuses now when they do their domestic violence awareness walk. And I've stood on tables and talked to, 50, 60 kids around me. And they all come up later and they say, you just made it so real. You painted a picture I can see. And I used to say to myself, that would never happen to me. But after I hear you, you were smart, you weren't. So it just helps them understand better, I think.
Let me ask you a question unrelated, since we're talking
Absolutely.
about that's obviously the social impact of poetry is very important. But also, the art is important and the people you meet are important. Let me start with the art. And I think I'm now going to ask this question to everyone I ever talk to in Erie from here on out. Who's your favorite Erie poet? And that's maybe that. If you don't want to answer, you don't have to.
I'm on film.
You're on film. You can give me like
I
favorite
have
Erie
to-
poets and understand that maybe we're leaving some people out.
Okay.
So we don't.
On the male side, obviously C. Williams. Especially, C was always good. But since he went through losing his mother and then losing this dog, and I believe I mean, I've gone through it too. I know what both instances are like. His poetry has gone way above and to another level that it's just, you can't deny it. Matt Borzon writes about being in Afghanistan. And I have to say, I might even have been one of those people who thought, oh, he was a nurse, he wasn't on the front lines until you hear his poetry. He has a book called The Clock of Human Bones, where they were stacking up the limbs that,
And we know that 85% of people in the military are support people, they're not combat people.
Right. But those are things I didn't think about in my
Right.
little world until
Right.
I met Matt,
Right.
and he's phenomenal. I love his brother, has a whole different type, and his brother's got this growly voice that you just can't not listen to. Monica, and I'm not exactly sure how to say her last name. Egris, yes. I love Monica. We hug for 20 minutes at a time when we get together. Marisa, I don't want to get in any trouble. Daryl Brown, did I say him? Daryl Brown and his stuff on homelessness. He has a poem called The Climb. That's about trying to climb out of the pit and keep sliding down on homelessness. And I cry every time I hear it. And I put him in WOW for that reason. And when he does the climb, he starts way in the back of the stage and he kind of goes back and forth while he's doing it. And at the very end of the poem, it goes climb, 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 and he comes right up and you see people like that in their chairs. But it's phenomenal.
Maybe I could be more fair about this. This is not a fair question to ask a poet on the scene. Is there...
Kat Walper.
Kat Walper, yes,
Yes.
she's a wonderful poet.
Fun. Her stuff is always, and she makes you think, but in a totally different way.
That's really a great thing about being a part of a group of poets.
Yeah.
You do have to think in different ways depending on who's...
Right,
who
exactly.
whose poetry
Right.
you're engaging, right?
Mhm.
So maybe a favorite poetry event over the years. One event that still sticks out in your mind that maybe reminds you of Mike and love.
Okay. I have to add Heidi Blakeson to my list, but
Okay.
she's moved to Pittsburgh, so that's why she wasn't on the top of my tongue. She used to run a thing called Poetry in the Park that he and I were very involved in. We brought in all the, we had a wicker chair, and I had a philodendron plant
You
called
pulled out
Phil.
the wicker for it.
Yeah, and Phil, the plant, would come and sit right next
Sure.
to it, and it was 4 or 5 years, and it was a wonderful event. And Poet Joe came one year with one rocket boot on and one flat, and walked out like this and did his. I mean, everybody was
Who is
noble.
Poet? Explain who Poet Joe is.
Joe Gallagher.
Oh, I know Joe Gallagher. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know he was called Poet Joe.
I met him as
Okay.
Poet Joe. Yes.
Ah, yes, I know Joe Gallagher.
And he
Okay.
wears his hair, head
Sure.
shaved. And one time at the bookstore, he brought some ink, and he had a whole handful of white hankies. He poured ink on his head, and he did ink blots to go. And I have one of those in my basement.
Joe Gallagher, if you're out
I
there, we
love
were
him.
supposed to talk a couple of years ago, and that never happened. It's my fault, but we need to do that soon.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so I think Poetry in the Park, I'm
all-
taking mine
whole
off
series,
the list.
just the
yeah.
whole thing as a
Yes,
series.
yes.
Is something that you
Yeah.
love.
And of course, I love what I do with mine because I'm the producer, director, and I participate in it and so on. And it is a theatrical production.
Do you see yourself being involved in the community of poets, the life of poetry here for the rest of your life?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless my brain shuts down.
So no matter how old and decrepit we get,
Yeah.
we should continue to do this
Yes.
until we're
Yes.
unable to.
We'll have to figure
move.
out how he can put the camera on his wheelchair.
Okay. Agreed. Let's see. Have you gone other places to talk about or to read your poetry? And what have you discovered in going to other places about other communities of poets?
Okay. In 1990, I met a poet who was based in Philadelphia, Wilkes-Barre area, Craig Church. And he really encouraged me a lot in the beginning to keep writing and adjust maybe this and don't worry about rhyming all the time and all those kind of things that, when you're new to poetry, you're doing wrong. And he had an event in Philadelphia. And so it was at the Painted Bride Museum.
Oh, yeah.
You know it?
Well, I know the Painted Bride Quarterly. It's a
Ah.
magazine called Painted Bride Quarterly.
Well, it was this really, really cool old building. And they had one wall that every month it was like painted white, and they would let a few select poets go in and write their poem on the wall, and it would stay up for a month, and then it would be whitewashed again. And then I had a poem on the wall, the painted red. So, and then I've been to Michigan to read. I have been to Ohio. I went to Florida and really tried to find a place to read, but couldn't find one that my son and daughter-in-law said was in a part of town that
Where
I
in
was safe.
Florida?
I was in Orlando, and we tried to find something, and there was online. There were a lot of them that said they were up there, and then you call them and say, "Oh, we haven't done that in 2 years." And I was like,
My wife is from Florida, so I spent
Oh.
a lot of time down there. There are poetry readings, but they are hit or miss.
Yeah.
And sometimes they include things that aren't poetry. They
Yeah.
just kind of mix in.
there were a lot of musical open
Yes,
mics.
exactly.
Yeah, tons of them.
Right.
I couldn't find poetry.
So
though.
it's a bit of a passport,
Yeah.
poetry.
Yeah.
It's gotten you to a few places.
Oh yeah,
That's
absolutely.
good.
One of my goals is to add as many states or big cities as
Oh.
I can. Just
Come to New York.
I don't know. See, this
Oh,
is,
come
I
on.
want no. I want to travel. I don't want to travel.
Oh.
I just recently flew back from Orlando, and my ear was killing me for a week, and so I want to do it. It's just getting over those humps.
I understand. I understand. Yes, I just drove to Erie. So
Yeah, you drove.
I did not fly in Blair. I was tired. Thank you very much. So is there anything else you would like to say about the poetry community of Erie to people beyond Erie, maybe?
Well, I was in Michigan, and that community that I was in at that time was very tight-knit and supportive, and I've heard that since then that particular community kind of fell apart. I was recently in Ohio, and that community did not seem like they were all nurturing each other. So I have to say, what we have going on here, and then these poets are kind of, they don't realize, a lot of them travel, but a lot of them don't. You know, like Chuck's been all over Seagoes with Chuck and that kind of thing. But a lot of them don't travel, and they don't realize what a golden gift we have here in Erie with so many venues, so many coffee shops that'll let us just do it.
Well, I know that Chuck and C know that, and I know that Sean.
Oh,
There
Sean.
somewhere?
Sean's at the top of my list. I can't believe it. See, I have a brain injury. You know that, Sean.
So I'll just say that I know from communicating with Sean from
Oh.
a distance that Sean understands the kind of community you have here.
Yeah.
in Erie.
Yes, yes. Oh
Poet
my
who's
gosh.
traveled.
He is like
Yeah.
top of my list.
So,
And Lisa.
Lisa's
Oh.
just met Lisa and heard her poems for the first time last night.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. The chapbook she put out about them and the love they have for their daughters, they have two, but the one has some special needs, and the phenomenal poetry and how the two of them with their love have just let her be who she is instead of trying, you know, like so many people do to make her be
Yeah.
like everybody else. So
Yeah, maybe that's one of the
Phenomenal.
benefits of being a poet is
yeah,
you really see a lot of personalities colliding in one room
yeah,
because they all are attracted to this one art form.
yeah, yes.
And everybody seems to be usually okay with that.
Yeah. And most of us, I'm trying to think how to say this, we allow everybody to be free to be who they are.
Are there any, we can end on this, are there any rules in the world of poetry as far as you're concerned?
In writing, no. In my show, wow, you have to see it once first. As I explained,
You
it's
sound
just-
like an editor. Before you submit, please
Well-
read the magazine. Yeah.
Well, and it's really for a reason. I did try it a couple times. I broke my own rule, and no, the rule doesn't get broken anymore.
Okay. And that's it. Other
Yeah.
than that, we can do
Pretty
whatever
much
we like.
anything you want. Be kind to each other. Don't
Okay.
be slamming each other in poetry.
How do you feel about language that isn't PG?
Here's the thing. Like last night, Kim Noyes did one that
Yeah.
made us laugh our butt off because he never does that.
Yes, he's a
But
very
he told-
decorous man.
He told him ahead of time, turn the camera off, because he knows I play the show. It could go 9 a.m. in the morning, and the kids could be walking by the TV. So I don't have a problem with people having that kind of language. Just if it's going on my show, then it has to be. I have to edit
Because there
that
could
out.
be there
Yeah,
could be kids
right.
in the room.
And you actually have to sign something at Cat TV that says, is this okay for any audience or?
Have you met my son, by the way?
No, I don't
Speaking of
think I
foul
have.
language, no, I'm just kidding. Kidding, Bradley.
We have one of those
So,
too.
yeah.
And I'll let them all guess because we got lots of them.
Well, I have no further questions, as they say, and I want to thank you for allowing me some time.
Well, I want to ask you, what
Sure,
gave
please.
you the idea to do this?
Oh, good Lord.
communities track?
I think I was at a point in my career. I'm a professor by trade. That's my day job. I enjoy it. It is not what I live to do. What I live to do is write and hear and talk to people about writing. And so I got to a point where I thought, well, they've given me this privilege of the special privilege that they gave me at the college. They rewarded me for being productive. And I thought, well, what can I do now? I'm supposed to be productive. And what is it that I'm positioned to do? What am I qualified to do? I'm not really an expert in this. I'm not really an expert in that. But I do have some things going for me, like I've been involved with performance poetry for 25 years. I've always been a poet. I'm an academic. I know how to do research. I was a journalist for a little while, and I know how to interview people. I've done that kind of research. And I really like to travel around and talk to people about poetry and writing. And so I applied for an NEA grant, which I did not get, but I was nominated for, which I was happy about. It's a privilege just to be nominated. And then I did get a few little grants that allowed me to travel and talk to people, and that's continued for a few years. And it's been, once I started doing it, I got kind of addicted to it.
Yeah, not bad.
Not travel so much as just sitting around and talking and meeting hundreds of different people who are involved in poetry in different ways. So that's it. That's the story. And with any luck, this research will be completed in the spring of 2019, and will end with the New Orleans Poetry Festival and a little time with Bill Lavender being his shadow. Bill's a poet and publisher. And I'll probably come back to Erie a couple of times next year and talk to a few more people and start writing.
Yeah,
And who
awesome.
knows what'll happen.
Yeah.
You know how it is when you start writing. You never
Yes.
know if it's ever gonna
Right,
be anything.
right.
Yeah. So
Well, when I started the WOW thing, I never, will I get one show? Yeah, I got one show, and then they let me come back. And then when I went to Edinburgh to go to school, I don't know where I got the bravery, but I went and said, hey, I've been doing this thing on Penn State. Do you want me to keep doing it there, or do you want me to bring it to Edinburgh? And they're like, bring it here during Women's History Month. So
yeah, it's
in year
amazing.
9.
And it always amazes me how people will give their time and their energy and their interest to a project that you think is something, maybe it's just a small slice, and it turns out to be a much larger slice than you thought.
Yeah.
And that's only a good thing, because God knows we need some commonality
Yeah.
at this particular moment. We need some
Yeah.
things we can talk about in common and share different experiences
Yeah.
from different points of view. So, yeah.
Well, and would you please tell us just a little bit about you and your family? You mentioned a son.
I was raised where I live on Long Island. I have a son. I'm married. I have an 11-year-old son. Hi, Bradley. Hi, Denise, my wife. I went to college in New York City. I was always wanted to be a writer from the time I was 12 years old. I wrote poetry and other stuff. I thought I would be a journalist. That didn't quite happen. So I fell into English graduate school and saw that I liked teaching. Okay, so I became a professor. It took me a long time to get out of graduate school. And I finally did. Was lucky enough to get a job accidentally in New York City. I didn't want to stay there anymore, but my ex-wife kind of dragged me back. And that's where I still am. And probably will finish my career there. And I spend a lot of time in Western New York, where we have a place that we were lucky enough to get. When you get divorced, you get like certain consolation prizes. That was one of my consolation prizes. I got to get a little piece of land there. I kind of split my time when I can. I'm not teaching. I'm up in Western New York, and it's close to Erie,
Yeah.
which is great, and it's close to Rochester, which is another great community of poets in Buffalo.
Yeah.
So that's my story pretty much right now. I'm just finished another poetry manuscript, and I'm about to wrap up a novel.
Awesome.
And then there's this project. So, yeah.
Do you think that growing up in Long Island, New York City, being a youth and traveling through the bustling place, helped you to have the wanderlust that you have and be able to travel, the guts to do it?
So the funny part is I don't really have wanderlust anymore. I haven't been out of the country in 12 years, except for Canada. Not that Canada's not wonderful, but I do enjoy, when I get to do it, I do enjoy it, and that's really a nice surprise, right? But yeah, as far as being in New York City taught me a lot of things. It taught me, first and foremost, that everybody can get along. And I grew up in a fairly diverse community on Long Island, but even that didn't prepare me for the extreme diversity of New York City, where it's just everyone is in your face all the time. Not that it doesn't have its prejudices, its biases, and its problems. God knows it has problems, but it's an amazing experience to grow up where everyone is together and has to get along.
Yeah.
And so I sense that here too.
Yeah.
And other places that I like, I gravitate toward those places.
As a social worker, I see Erie a little differently than maybe the average person. There are so many organizations out there helping the poor, no matter what color they are, no matter what they're, we don't ask those questions when they come to our door,
Right.
Where do you practice, so.
Right.
It makes me sick that we were nominated, the worst of this and the worst of that, when I see so much giving and community.
Well, it's also a big theme of the book. I didn't mean to talk about this, but I will.
No, it's fine.
A big theme of the book is that, poetry communities, it turns out, are kind of like an alternative culture. They're an alternative news source. They're an alternative to mass media and mainstream culture. And mass media, and I'm not necessarily agreeing with our president, I frankly, personally agree with on very little. He's right about one thing. The media does distort reality. And when I saw the coverage of Erie on national news, I thought, that's partly true, and partly not, from what I know at least. There's nothing positive that's being shown here that's, there's a lot positive going on.
The truth about Erie is that we did have all that snow. That's true.
The snow is the snow.
And snow is white.
I am sorry.
So it's white privilege.
It's white privilege. White privilege snow, yes. Yes, and I know that your poet laureate, almost it seems against her will, but moved to Florida recently, and she seems really just torn about it. And I just had a wonderful conversation with her, and I could see the attachment that people have to this place when they're from here.
Right.
It's pretty remarkable.
A lot of people grow up and say, I can't wait to get out of here, there's nothing for me here, and they all come back. I have never said that. That lake is mine, and I share it with everyone else. And I couldn't live anywhere else because I know she is north. And I can go anywhere in a really wide range and know where north is, so I don't get lost. But if I lived in the desert, I'd be lost every day.
That's one. Okay, I hadn't thought of that. So it really is. Directions are very important.
Yes,
is what you're saying.
you get to a top of the hill, you can find the lake, you know where north
No
is.
GPS necessary.
Right.
Excellent.
Old school. I'm very old school. I love maps. I'm a map person. I don't GPS.
There's a very old school vibe here too, I have to say.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you again.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate the chance to talk to you.
Yeah, this was awesome. Now we'll have to return our bench so that there's
We
not
do. We have to return the set. We're going to
Yeah.
bring the set back to where we got
We
it.
don't want an
before we
APB
get
on us.
arrested. And, right.
I think anybody will notice.
All right, this is Poetry, Prose, and Personality, George Gaida, and this was phenomenal. Thank you.